Welcome back after lunch. See people trickling in after getting fed. I am delighted to be able to introduce Kirsten Walberg with PayPal. She actually spoke at our user conference earlier this year for us, and this was the most popular talk. So those of you who made it over here now, that was a good decision. This is a great story. So Kirsten has a background actually leading the transformation to Agile at PayPal with more than 5,000 people. So she's going to tell the story of what it looks like to go all in with a large-scale Agile transformation. And you will be impressed just because I've seen her speak and it's just impressive, but also she was named one of the top 100 most influential women in technology. So enjoy, and I'll pass it off to Kirsten. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. The PayPal transformation story for me actually starts at Salesforce.com. I was a week into my brand new job as CIO at Salesforce. I had a meeting with my new boss, Parker Harris, and I sat down like any good new employee would with their boss, and I asked, so what are the top priorities you have for the IT organization? Parker looked at me and he said, I only have one priority. You need to move the entire IT organization to Agile in 2 months. So I smiled, okay, got that, wrote that down. But what was going on inside my head was the Home Alone face. You know, I was terrified because I had absolutely no idea what Agile was. I knew how to spell Agile. Didn't know if Agile was actually with a capital A or a lowercase a, but I did know how to spell Agile. But that was about it. So what I can say is thank God for Google. So I spent some serious time doing some serious searches trying to figure out what is this thing called Agile. I had come from Charles Schwab, where I had spent 7 years working with the Rational Unified Process, or RUP. And so this was brand new for me. And so went back with my leadership team and I said, okay, let's do this. And we did. And looking back in retrospect, it was actually pretty easy. In 2 months to take the entire technology organization to Agile. And why was it easy? Well, I think life is easy when there are no alternatives, right? It's like, okay, we all knew we had to do it. And so let's do this, and we did. So across that process, I had a lot of incredible learning about Agile. What it is, I knew way more than just how to spell it, and I also gained a lot of confidence. But where I really started to learn and understand about Agile was when I came to PayPal and started to lead the PayPal transformation. To put this in perspective, the change that we made at PayPal, the change that we made at Salesforce was 3% of the size of the change that we made at PayPal. And so this is really a story about making change and implementing Agile at scale. I want to tell this story today in 3 different chapters. So the first chapter is really the case for change. Like, why would a very successful product leading company in the payment space, why did we need to change? The second chapter is the structure of the change. How did we set ourselves up to actually make this change at scale? And the third chapter that we're going to talk about is the most controversial aspect of this story, which is kind of a deeper dive into how we did it, which was in a big bang. And many of you probably come from waterfall shops where everyone talks about the Big Bang as being the horrible thing. It's the thing that is at the end of a project and it never works. Well, the good news, I'll do a spoiler alert here. The good news is, in PayPal's case, the Big Bang actually did work. And so I'll talk a little bit about why it worked, why I think it was so important, and why it was really the cornerstone of the success that we had across the PayPal transformation. But first, let's start with the case for change. So when I came into PayPal, I did what most good leaders would do. You sit down with your customers, you sit down with your business partners, you sit down with developers and really understand what's going on in the environment, like what's happening here. And time again, the theme that came back based on those conversations was, we are working really, really, really hard here, and we are not getting the results. It's just incredibly difficult to get work done. And why was it so difficult to get work done? There were a lot of root causes to this problem. One of the problems that we had was we had a distributed product organization. We had 8 different product organizations across the globe. 4 different development centers, 40 different business offices, and product management everywhere. No common leadership. As well, we didn't have a product hierarchy. We didn't even have our products defined. If you were to ask somebody what products PayPal had, no one could actually answer that question. Seems kind of crazy for a 12-year-old company, right? So we also, from a technology perspective, we had implemented technology domains. The intent behind this was really, really great, right? You want to get specialists. You want to get people who really understand the technology, who really understand the processes, and who really understand the business context within a particular business domain. We got so good at it, we developed 85 different technology domains. And that may not resonate with you, but if you're a developer, that means there are 85 places where you can find a bottleneck that make it absolutely impossible to get any work done. And we definitely had done that. And overall, we were very project focused. And so project focused, that means if we had something that needed to get done, we would field a team of individuals from across the different domains that were necessary. We would pull them together into a project, and they would work and work and work and work and work, and hopefully at the end of some undefined period, they would get to an end product. That end product was always lacking in some way, right? We'd had to cut scope in order to meet the timelines. We had to move this domain expert over to this critical project, so we really kind of were limping along in that particular area. The project, when it was done, was never actually done. But we would declare it done. We would have a great party. We had some really great parties. But after that, all of the individuals who'd been working on the project, it was like a cockroach when the lights comes on, right? Scatter. You could not find a single person who had ever worked on that product. And what we found was we had a lot of orphaned products, products that weren't complete, that were halfway done, that weren't even halfway done, but they had been abandoned or orphaned by the organization. And so there was tons and tons and tons of waste. So you can see how, both from a leadership perspective as well as from a developer and a product management perspective, we are doing a lot of work, and we are not seeing a lot of results. PayPal is known as being a product leader in the payment space. But if you look back 3.5 years, we had actually only released 3 new products in about 18 months. That is hardly the productivity of a product leader. And certainly when you look at the payments market space now and how many competitors are really vying for a piece of this market, PayPal absolutely could not continue to operate the way they had in the past. So that really built our case for change. We had a new president in David Marcus who came from a very small startup environment. So he's like, hey, this big company stuff, this is not for me. We need to be doing things differently. And we had new leadership in me really believing that we needed to fundamentally change to make it easier for people to get work done. So let's start chapter 2. So now we're all in agreement that we need to make the change. We've made the case. Chapter 2, we looked at how are we going to actually structure this to get it done. First thing, our first premise is we wanted to make sure that we were working in Agile teams. This is Agile on Agile, right? We're going to be drinking our own champagne, eating our own dog food, whatever, bad analogy you want to use, but we wanted to ensure that as we were moving to Agile, we were gaining experience along the way. We had 11 cross-functional teams. There were many, many people who volunteered to be part of this, but there were also many, many people who were voluntold, right? So some people came willingly, others came kind of begrudgingly, kicking and screaming along the way. But we had these teams that all worked together through the course of through the launch period. We had 4 pillars to the change. And I think it's important. A lot of people talk about Agile transformation. We always called it the PayPal transformation because it wasn't just about Agile. Fundamentally, we were changing everything about the way we did business and the way we developed products. So the first pillar of the change was CDI, or customer-driven innovation, also known as design thinking. We were a company who had gotten very, very internally focused. Customer-driven innovation gave us the tools we needed to have the teams out in the marketplaces actually working with our customers, asking them, like, what is really broken? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? The CDI gave them the tools to be able to really understand from the outside in, let's start building products that our customers really want and need. The second pillar of the change goes back to the product hierarchy. I talked about the fact we didn't have any product lines defined. In order to really move to Agile, we needed to have clear ownership for the products. We spent 7 months. You know, when I first embarked on that, I thought, oh, it'll take us a couple of brainstorming sessions. It'll be a couple of weeks. We can get this pounded out. No. It was incredibly difficult, and it was an iterative process that took us more than 7 months to finally get to 17 distinct and discrete product lines with 31 sub-product lines and 86 delivery groups rolling up into those sub-product lines. And that was really, really important from a structure perspective, and it structured everything for the transformation as well as how we operate and do business today. The third pillar of the transformation was the move to Agile. So this was the process of fielding over 300 teams to begin working in Agile Scrum and actually building product in an iterative way using fixed time box to deliver value to our end customer. The final pillar was the introduction of key performance indicators, or KPIs. So we wanted to make sure that we were measuring our success. This wasn't about doing Agile for Agile's sake. This wasn't about CDI for CDI's sake. This was, let's ensure that we are actually making a change that is going to drive value to our end customer. And so it was a big part of the overall success that we instrumented and made sure that we had the ability to measure our success and our failures and our places where we need to really double down and iterate to better solutions. So the 4 pillars of CDI, the product hierarchy and product model, Agile delivery, and KPIs, that is the definition of the PayPal transformation. And I cannot enforce enough the fact that it wasn't simply us trying to say, okay, let's put some Scrum teams in place and let's do Agile. I think if we'd approached it in that way, we would not have had both the cultural change that we needed, as well as the process change across the entire software development lifecycle that would have enabled us to be successful in this realm. So that's the second chapter and how we structured the change. The final chapter is around how we did that. And I said it was the Big Bang. And I'm a management consultant in a former life, and management consultants will tell you, whatever you do, do not do a Big Bang. This is like the kiss of death. You are going to kill yourself, the project. It's just not a good idea. You start with a pilot, and then you move into iterative implementation going forward. I felt, based on the experience that I had had at Salesforce, as well as a deep understanding of our development process at PayPal, that if we tried to do an iterative release of the transformation, we would absolutely fail. We would fail because we would have all of the pain associated with the change, and we would have none of the benefits. Because it took at least 15 teams to develop any single product at PayPal. And that meant no matter how we tried to configure the waves of the implementation, you would have some teams that were using Agile as part of that development, and then you'd have some teams that were not. And so all the pain, none of the benefits, extended over the period of 3 to 4 years. And with a company that is as impatient as PayPal, and a company that has the kinds of market pressures that PayPal has, it was very clear to me that this was just not going to be an option. So I went into my boss, and I said, okay, James Rusty, CTO of PayPal, and I said, James, I think this is how we need to do it. I'm still very new at the company, right? I have not built any credibility. No one has seen me deliver a thing. And James essentially looks at me and goes, yeah, you just don't understand the way we do things here at PayPal. That's just, no, that's just not going to happen. And we had a very interesting and spirited dialogue while I expressed my very strong views about this is the way we needed to do this. And he expressed his very strong views about, no, this is not a good idea. And so ultimately, at the end of that conversation, I had to say to him, James, listen, I'm asking you to trust me. I have done this before. I have experience in this. And if I totally screw it up, you get to fire me, right? So there is a fall person for this risk and for this decision. And I have to say, God bless James, because he looked at me and he said, I trust you, and I still think this is going to be a colossal miss. You are going to fail spectacularly, I think were his words. It's like, great, I'm not just going to fail, I'm going to fail spectacularly. I can't wait for that. So we had to do a lot of planning. A lot of planning. You can't go into a transformation at this kind of scale. Again, we had about 3,500 people across the globe in 4 major development centers and 40 offices across the globe. And we were tackling this in a big bang. So everybody was going to change to be operating in the same way on the same day. So lots and lots of planning had to go into this. The first part of the planning aspect was really building the skills and capabilities. We had to get everybody on the ground trained. 1 day of Agile training. If you are a product owner, 1 day of product owner training. If you are a Scrum Master, 1 day of Scrum Master training. If you were a dev manager, we gave you dev manager training because ultimately your job was completely changing. This was freaking out the dev managers, by the way. And we also did a day of CDI training for our product owners and many of our technology leaders as well as Scrum team members. For Rally, which was the tool we decided to roll out, we didn't have actual training sessions for Rally, but we did a whole series of really, really effective short, on-demand videos that team members, as they were looking to do any particular activity within the tool, they had a step-by-step tutorial that the training would take them through. I think this was a really, it gave us the ability to scale and it gave us the ability to leverage. We had lots of modules not only on the tools, but also on the process as well. Next was the organization. How do we get the organization ready? The organization, we had to field teams. It was kind of like this big, massive draft. It was so fun, right? You're like, okay, we've got 3,500 people in all these different roles with all these different domain skills. We're going to pull these teams together into 7 to 10 person Scrum teams. And we're going to have each of those Scrum teams have some kind of specialization. We call those building blocks or flavors of teams. And then we got to take all of those flavors and put the recipes together to say, this complement of teams with these flavors are going to be able to develop products for this particular sub-product line or product line. So we fielded those teams. And We then also had to look at 376, I think. We had over 370 projects that were in Clarity IDs for these projects, and had to say, okay, what do we do with everything that's in flight? Like, what are we going to do here? We took those 376 projects, and we had to map those projects into the delivery teams and the product lines that we had just developed. And that was incredibly challenging, incredibly complex, I think is the best word. We had a very complex environment, so trying to really pull all of those pieces together, it took several months of iteration to actually get to that place. So then we had the organization pulled together. We had to think about tools. The primary tool that we used is Rally, and we went through, at that time, a very extensive RFP process, looked at all of the tools, and Rally was the answer for us because it was something that could scale and could operate at the scale that PayPal was operating. It was an important design decision that we made to make sure that all of our teams were going to be in the same workspace. This language may not be second nature to you, but within the Rally context, you have a workspace. So everybody, it was important for us, all teams be able to see what all teams are working on. All teams were able to see dependencies between teams. And ultimately, at a portfolio level, being in the same workspace made it possible for us to do portfolio level planning and execution. So we pulled that together with a tool. I talked about the fact that we didn't have a lot of laws when we were rolling out. So if you know developers like I know developers, you tell them they must do something and their absolute DNA says, not doing it. So we tried to absolutely minimize those things that would create that kind of resistance. So the only two laws that we had, one, everybody had to be operating on the same sprint cadence. So we had 2-week sprint, the entire company. All 305 teams had to be operating with the exact same 2-week sprint cadence. No 3 weeks, no 4 weeks. You had to start on the same day and you had to end on the same day. The other law was all of your work needs to be in Rally. If you want to have Excel spreadsheets, great, knock yourself out. You're also going to put it in Rally. And this gave us the ability to really start to get the transparency. Everyone talks about Agile being this amazing thing that gives you transparency. Agile itself does not give you transparency. In our case, it was the tool that we chose and how we chose to configure that tool and how we chose to use that tool that gave us the transparency that was really so important in this transformation. And so then we had all the teams set up, all of the projects mapped. Did we just flip a switch? Oh, I wish we had. Actually, I don't wish we had because it would have been a failure. What we then had to do was work with the teams to make the decision around migration. So we looked at all of the projects, and each team had to make a decision. We are either going to finish up in waterfall, because we had many, with that number of projects, we had many projects that were, literally weeks or a month from being complete. Do we really want to move into Agile for those projects? Your second option was to, mid-project, do a release and a sprint plan and start to move forward in Agile. And our last option was, if you've either just started or about ready to start, you were going to restart in Agile, or your project must start in Agile. So every team had to go through that migration process, and for every single project, make a decision. If you made a decision that you were going to continue in waterfall, you did not just get to say, Agile, talk to the hand, we are not interested. Every single team had to have at least a single story in the team that they were working on in an Agile way. it was really important to us to make sure that all of the teams who've just gone through all of this skill building, just gone through all of this training, have the ability to actually start working in an Agile way. So the teams then started to scrum. And as you would expect, things were a little rocky at first. Most of the teams really stumbled and struggled. And many of the development managers spent a lot of time, and I do mean a lot of time, trying to convince everyone around them that this was the worst idea ever. So we called it the permafrost layer. I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska, so I know all about permafrost. It's that layer of ice that never, ever, ever melts. And for us, that level was really in the dev management. The dev managers, the culture that we had at PayPal was one of a hero culture. So a project's going totally south, and I'm a dev manager, so I'm going to come to you, and I'm going to say, you've got to fix this. You're a dev manager, you pulled this guy, that guy, this gal, and suddenly, woohoo, I'm a hero, I have fixed everything. So my power, my promotion, and my standing within the organization is entirely related to how many times I can be a hero and how many projects I can save. This is absolutely counter to working in an Agile environment. The dev managers no longer owned, yes, they still had reporting relationships, but they no longer owned team members. And it was the product owners who were defining the priorities and what each individual team was going to be working on. And so this transition for the dev managers was very, very difficult. So during the first few months of the transformation, and honestly, we probably still today have a few dev managers who are not completely with the program, but we struggled up front as we went through the early days. But on May 8th, 2013, was the date that we cut over, we did our big bang, and started from that point forward having every team within PayPal. And so this wasn't just this division, this product, this department. It was the entire company started to work in this new way on the same day. And I think we started to see the benefits really, really quickly from that point forward. Literally month after month after month, you could see the team, and we had the measurement of the metrics in place, you could see the team's productivity improving. For us, 6 months after we had launched the transformation, we had developed and released 58 new products or features. So before the transformation, 3 in 18 months. After the transformation, 58 in 6 months. So very quickly we could see that the changes that we had implemented were actually starting to deliver real value to our customers. And I think that had we not approached this from a big bang perspective, I feel very confident that I, would not be telling any story on this stage, because I would be like many, many, many other people who have tried to implement Agile at scale and would say, well, yeah, it's kind of working. We kind of got these teams that are, but overwhelmingly it would not be the success that we have seen and been able to measure at PayPal. So I am quite confident that this is a recipe and this is a story that is not unique to PayPal. This is a story that definitely can be and will be seen and lived in many, many, many companies to come. And I do hope that today, through understanding what the case for change was for PayPal, how we structured that change, and really why a big bang implementation approach is something that, if you haven't moved in this direction, is something that perhaps you should consider, particularly if you're looking to do implementation at scale. So I thank you very much. We have a mic here and about 10, 15 minutes for questions for anybody who might have questions. Can you come up to the mic?
Among the defined agile teams, do you have resources actually share across the team, or they're 100% focused on one team?
They're 100% focused on one team. The exceptions that we have to that, we do have some Scrum Masters that are responsible for multiple teams, but the overwhelming majority of the individuals who are on the teams are dedicated to those teams. We have a metric and a measure that we look at, which is team stability, because we find that those teams that stick together are far more productive. And so with that, we are really looking to make sure that the teams stay intact and the same members are on that team and continue to be within that same product line. It also builds a lot greater ownership around the products.
What's your average team size?
Can you come up to the mic? I was told that if you scream from the audience, they can't hear it in the back.
Hi, what's your average team size?
So when we started, we had two different team sizes. We had a big team, the large team, and the small team. So a large team had 6 dev on the team, so roughly 10 people on that team. A small team had 3 devs, so 5 to 6 people on that team. And we still have bigger teams and smaller teams, but try to keep generally in the same ratio.
What was your overall impact on staffing? Did you see it was more efficient, less efficient over time? And also, how does your test team integrate with your overall Scrum?
Yeah, so I'm going to repeat your question because I'm not sure I heard all of it. What's the...
What was the impact on staffing? Did you find it more efficient, less efficient?
Yeah, our impact on staffing, we from a productivity perspective, from a staffing perspective, once you were staffed on a particular team and staffed on a particular product, you stayed there. We do not have people moving around from team to team or from product to product. But what we started to see over the course, I think, of last year, we had 29% productivity improvement on average, and that was with an 8% smaller team size. So significantly improved productivity and staffing over time.
So I'm curious about team capacity and what you were focused on. Were you focused strictly on development capacity? Or were you looking at overall team capacity with the other members of the team had tasks that they were sizing and tracking as well?
So we quickly moved from dev days and thinking about our work in dev days to team sprints. So what we're really looking at from a team perspective is how many team sprints it's going to take to do X, Y, or Z work. So we're really now trying to take the work and map the teams to that work rather than vice versa. Did that answer your question? He's got those eyebrows that go down, which means no, you did not answer it at all. Try again.
Okay, so if we go back to just looking at maybe how you were using Rally in this aspect, you have in Rally the ability to put in your team capacity.
Yes.
And then you're looking at your burn down rates with respect to tasks that are going against that capacity. And in some of the organizations that I've been working with, people only want to track development capacity. So when you're looking at a team that may have 6 developers, a product owner and a systems analyst and so forth, they're not tracking the capacity of the product owner or the system analyst work. So the question was, are you just focused on development capacity or overall team capacity?
So we're focused on overall team capacity. Thank you for re-asking the question. I understand it now. We're focused on overall team capacity, and we're looking at what is the team, how much work can that team complete in a given time period or a sprint. So we're looking at both, and it's always the overall team capacity.
Coming from an organization with about 100,000 people, we have about 18 to 20,000 people in technology. Would you, looking at the approach, would you still go big bang operating in sort of 100 different countries with 18,000 sort of technology employees all trying to sort of run on Agile, or would you change that approach? Any advice on that side of things?
What I would say is I would do big bang, but I would do big bang within the context, all 180,000 people are not working together, I would assume, to get a project done. So I would look at isolating those individuals who will have interdependencies and taking that entire block. And so I think that block could be as many as 50 or 60,000 people if they're all truly interdependent, but being real with yourself and trying to get that to the smallest possible number. Does that make sense? Come to the mic, please.
The question is, did the number of staff increased during this transformation process? The reason I ask is, in a healthy Scrum team, a team with a size 4 or 5 developer, and you should staff with QA for CI. Also, at the program level, you would look at build and release. So in the past, I'm sure that one person wears so many hats.
Right.
So I think at the launch day or during the planning, you guys may say, do you want to be the product only? Do you want to be the dev only? Do you want to be the Scrum Master only? So you basically having one person who used to do this many things,
right,
and now you spread it. So back to my first question, did the number of staff get increased, and how you did that?
So we did not actually increase staff. Ultimately, we decreased staff. And we had the discipline within the team and within the tool as well to define who is the Scrum Master, who is the product owner, who is going to play those roles. They still may play multiple roles because we have many teams where our Scrum Master is either a dev or a quality resource. So you didn't only wear one hat within the Scrum team. Many teams had individuals that were wearing multiple hats. So we continued that, but we made sure that we were clear in terms of tracking that team, which individuals were playing which role. And ultimately, over time, it's enabled us to bring down the number of people on the teams rather than increase the number of people on the teams. Though one thing we have done is we've increased. We started with like 305, and we're now over 400 teams. So over the course of time, we have grown the number of teams that are doing work. Did that answer your question? I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
If you're a Scrum Master and also a product owner, and you may do 50%.
Understood. We do not have product owners and Scrum Masters in the same person. That's a really great quantification there.
I'm testing manager, so my interest is how did you align or integrate the testing teams in this transformation?
Yeah, so our testing teams, we embedded quality. Prior to the transformation, we had very clear lines between these are individuals who do quality functions and testing functions, and these are individuals who do development functions. During the process of fielding the teams and coming together as Scrum teams, those lines began to blur. We did have within each team both dev, and for the most part, we did have quality individuals who were part of each team. However, the responsibility of the team was to do the testing. So if you happen to be on one of the few teams that did not have any quality engineers on your team, well, guess what, dev? You get to do testing now, which was quite controversial and which was something that the dev teams were not excited about. But ultimately, over time, we've started to blur the lines between a test engineer and a dev engineer, and everyone on the team is responsible for making sure those functions complete. I've got a thumbs up over here.
Quick question, in terms of the teams, so a lot of this is obviously dev-based. Now, in terms of the infrastructure guys, so you have your core server guys, networks, databases, all those types of people. What sort of interface is there? Are they outside of those Scrum teams? Are they inside those Scrum teams?
Yeah, they are. Those individuals are outside of the Scrum teams. It's still very much a ticket-based system in order to engage those engineers into the overall process. We are looking at really incorporating and have been able to, certainly for the release function, as we look at the release function, bring Agile into that release function. We now have the capability. It used to take us about 6 weeks beginning to end to do a release. And we now have, the majority of our teams have access to our own version of like PayPal Open Table. If you're a team and you're wanting to release code, you go into the system, you find out which slot is open, and 6 different windows throughout the day where teams have the ability to actually release code. So we've been able to really bring our release functions in line with Agile, but we still are working on the core operations and infrastructure components. And honestly, when I was at Salesforce, this was a real struggle for us. Across Salesforce, we did have everybody in operations also operating in Scrum. We successfully, she says with a question mark at the end of the sentence, built a data center using Agile Scrum, and it was the most painful thing any of us had ever done in our entire lives. So I think really you have to look at what are the functions that are being done, and is Agile delivery really the right model based on the work that's being done. I think there are many places within operations and DevOps in particular where Agile is an appropriate tool. I think there are many places in operations where Agile is not an appropriate tool.
So I had a follow-up question to the discussion about QA testers and development and so forth. Have you moved in the direction of test-driven development?
Yes. Yes, many of our teams are doing test-driven development. And one thing I should have mentioned is the teams were not on their own. We had 21 coaches that were Agile coaches worldwide that were helping us. One of the things that I think was great is we had a number of our coaches were very, very skillful in test-driven development and worked with our teams to help them understand these concepts and help them implement them on an ongoing basis. So coaching was really, really important, particularly in some of those core engineering practices that needed to change as a result of moving to Agile.
First of all, thank you for the wonderful speech. We have Nick Sathe, who is from PayPal. He's the CTO of Amex. He's doing a brilliant job in guiding us through the same agile transformation at Amex. You were talking about sharing of resources across different teams.
Yes.
So what happens if there is like a production issue where, let's say, a developer who has actually developed the code needs to work on the production issue? So how does he work on the current sprint as well as take care of the production releases? How do you manage that in Rally? Or how do you manage that as a team?
Yeah, so one of the things that's really important for the teams is if they truly own this code and they truly own this product, any problem with that code or with that product has to go back into that team. And so the teams handle it in different ways. Many of the teams have will have a story that is for bugs, and they will book that production support time to that bug. But essentially, they recognize that bugs, certainly our P0, P1 bugs, go to the top of the backlog and the work that the team is doing. So that developer would have to do both. And it's not the developer, though. It's really the team. Like, how is the team going to deal with that? How is the team going to solve for that problem?
I can imagine that you also have to deal with all kind of financial compliancy. Yeah. Can you elaborate a bit how you fit that in these agile teams?
So from a compliance perspective, compliance is obviously very important within a regulated environment such as PayPal. And so there's a couple of different concepts that we use, and we continue to iterate on as we move through. One was the concept of having a team of staff functions like compliance, like security, like marketing, like go-to-market, those being part of a team that was attached at the product line level. So we would have those experts working with the teams that were part of those product lines to make sure that they were staying in financial compliance, in all regulations, as well as from a security perspective, making sure that all of our secure standards were being adhered to. So those teams were there. We also have teams that are purely compliance, right? That all the teams do, every person on that team is focused on doing stories that relate to compliance. So in those cases, we have dedicated teams that are just working on and doing a variety of different compliance functions. That answer your question? All right, we've got 18 seconds. Anybody have one last question? All right, well, thank you so much. I appreciate your engagement.